coming upon us in a couple of days. I mean, Independence Day. Yeah, same shit. So this whole episode is really going to be focused on the fact that the Supreme Court, these guys, have been fucking up. And so we've had a lot of cases this session come through, and we knew this was going to be a troublesome set of times because of the 6-3 conservative to liberal judges, which really shouldn't be a thing in the Supreme Court. But over the last handful of days, the Supreme Court has gone on to make the statement that Joe Biden's student loan forgiveness is gone. It's no longer a law of the land. And if you watched when it became a thing, you saw how I joyously celebrated. Well, I take it back. 2, that creative businesses, specifically creative businesses, can discriminate, but only kind of. And the third one is adios affirmative action. New definition for AAA. All right, so let's go into the first one. The first one is, in the last year, Joe Biden was able, in the Democratic Senate, were able to push through the student loan forgiveness plan, right? And so what that was students who had debts up to $20,000 could basically have their loans forgiven. If you had more, you got that little bit cut out, which was great for interest rates and all these things, right? It was really good. And then all of a sudden, all these adversaries came out. People were like, no, I had to pay for mine. So the fuck what? You could pay for yours. Like that's the shit that's wild to me. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're feeding the homeless people in the soup line. They're giving out free soup. Yeah, they're homeless and need the free soup. You got soup. You got soup. You got ramen noodles. You got pasta. Let the motherfuckers have some soup. Let me have my $20,000 of loan forgiveness. Anyway, sorry, I got off track. And so what happened was, because of all of this backlash, they were literally sued, which went to the Supreme Court, and they lost. So beginning September 1st, all those student loan payments that, you forgot about, started spending on vacation and doing all that other shit, will be gone. Yeah. Back to out of pockets. Back to ramen noodles. Back to me volunteering at the soup kitchen because, they let us get soup at the end. I don't do that for real. And then our next big thing is this, the Christian web designer, what was her name? Lori Smith. Lori Smith was a Christian web designer, and this gay couple, basically was like, hey, we want to use this business. And she was like, what for? He was like, we gay, and we getting gay married. And she was like, oh, we don't do that here. And basically she cited her Christian morals as a reason that she could no longer service them. Christian morals, because Christian morals have a strong stance against things like homosexuality, but not gluttony. I didn't call her fat. Don't do that. I know what you're about to say. I did not call her fat. I'm just saying, don't pick and choose when you want to be righteous. That's all I'm saying. So what we have here is we have the Supreme Court defending her First Amendment right, which is basically, she doesn't want that message to get out on her own thing. The problem is they literally just effectively said, hey, you can discriminate against people. Fuck the protected class. You can literally discriminate against people if you don't think you like what's about to be put out in their message. So it's going to be real soon where you're going to go down south on a road trip and you're going to want some cherry pie. And you're going to walk into the restaurant, because it's creative cherry pie, because they put the slits on it, they're going to be like, oh, no. This is whites only pie. Listen, I promise you, businesses still have that in the back room right now. They waiting to dust. so glad we kept this. So it's not just going to be whites only pies. It's going to be no gay people, no trans folks. And the whole trans thing is already a big hot topic. But now you're going to get businesses, organizations that'll find the loophole in this to take advantage of it. So the problem is these now become statutes for other cases down the line. So other courts will be using these rulings by the Supreme Court to govern the law of the land going forward. Now, one of the biggest ones, and the one that got a lot of people really focused and up in arms after the Roe v. Wade decision was, of course, adios affirmative action. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled that colleges could not use race-based decisions in their acceptance. And that is all well and good if things were actually done the proper way. The reason why affirmative action even exists is because they said, oh, we're not doing it the right way, so we need a law, or we need an initiative, or we need something that's going to force schools to actually begin to allow students of color, women, Asian, foreign, to actually get into these schools, because these schools were dominated by white men. So, first, I want to pull up Clarence Thomas's statement from 1983, when he still had a little bit of melanin in his soul. Now I'm going to read this. I attended Yale Law School. Yale opened its heart, its conscience to recruit and admit minority students. I benefited from this effort. But for affirmative action, where would I be today? These laws and their proper application are all that stand before the first 17 years of my life and the last 17 years of my life. That was in 1983. That was 40 years ago. 40 years ago, Clarence Thomas was like, my black ass wouldn't even be where I am if it wasn't for affirmative action. And you would think that man would say, I want to stand for affirmative action. Man, shit. What'd he do? He did what everyone did. He got a little bit successful, moved on with his life, and then was like, this. I pray to white Jesus. He got a white wife. And now, legitimately, he voted against the same initiative which he says he took ownership of, saying this initiative is why I'm even where I am. The reason why I'm able to be where I am. He went complete Clarence Ruckus. And yes, I'm going to continue to call him that from now on, because Clarence Thomas died in 1983. I'm just going to put that out there. Clarence Ruckus, alive and strong. And so what really happened is, let's break down the cases that got us here. There were two cases, Harvard and UNC. And so the Harvard case was, there was an Asian student, there was a whole coalition of students who were like, hey, we're not getting into school, it's not fair. So it was like, all right, well, let's look at the admission demographic of Harvard, because that's where you got to get into, right? You got to go, all right, if they're saying things are unfair, let's look at the numbers. But then we look at the numbers, and the math don't math for Asian students being upset. You make up 30% of Harvard's demographic students. 30%. 30. 1/3. You make up 1/3 of Harvard's student body, and yet you're upset that you didn't get in. Maybe it just wasn't for you. Let's be fair. Harvard has, and a lot of colleges, let's be very honest, have a very fair admission policy when it comes to legacies, right? If you're a legacy, you might as well book it, right? If you are a A student, not a great A student, but like a normal A student, and you got regular SAT scores, but your mama and your grandmama I'm sorry, let me fix that. But your daddy and your granddaddy and your great-great-granddaddy went to Harvard. Guess where you're going? Harvard. Those are the admission practices that people actually need to look into. The fact that legacies get in being mediocre. Now, some of these legacies are smart and they're going to these great schools, Harvard, Westlake, and da-da-da-da. But let's be very honest. All of these legacies, you'd have met some of them. One of them was the 45th president of the United States. Just not all bright, okay? But instead of doing that, you focus on the 9% that's African American, the 7% that is, you know, unidentified. Basically, they're like, hey, you from here, there, and everywhere. So your focus is not on the actual problem. So not only has that been repealed back, UNC's case was, hey, are you using race-based for your mission? And they were like, well, yeah, why not? Why not guarantee that there are X amount of slots open for people who need it? Now, here's the crazy part. The biggest demographic that benefits from affirmative action are women. So if you now look at Harvard's numbers in itself, 52% of the student body are women. So you got 30% Asian, 52% women, and yet you're taking this institution to court and challenging affirmative action. Why again? Make it make sense. So, what we've had just recently the Moms for Liberty who were like, hey, we are so excited about this. And if you look at the Moms of Liberty, they're all moms. They're all women. They're all women who benefited from affirmative action if they went to school. If they went to school, let's say their merit was great. Let's say their grades were great. Yeah. Shut the fuck up. They benefited from affirmative action. And then you see Clarence Thomas's little sister on the back of the line. I don't know if it is or not, but the energy gives Clarence Ruckus little sister. Now, what's happened is, now this has become such a polarizing thing. You get people like Donald Trump who's on the campaign trail, and let's just play that clip.
Yesterday's Supreme Court ruling, I will eliminate all diversity, equity, and inclusion programs across the entire federal government. And I will direct the DOJ to pursue civil rights claims against any school, corporation, or university that engages in unlawful racial discrimination. We will restore a society based on equality, liberty, and merit. We're back with the merit. Can you believe this? This happened yesterday. Merit. You get good marks, you get in. You get bad marks, you maybe have to go someplace else.
We're going to restore a society of equality. When? What? Did I miss this? Was it in the 70s? No, that was drugs. Was it the 80s? No, that was crack. Was it the 90s? No, that was Power Rangers and G.I. Joe. I missed the equality movement in the United States of America. But apparently white people didn't, and they're so thrilled about it. Now, the problem is having someone, this is not just going to be a Donald Trump thing. You're going to have all these conservatives. DeSantis is going to jump on it. He already has done, like we've discussed before, a number of anti-DEI initiatives in his own state. They're going to jump on this, but to hear Mr. Trump, Teflon Don, the criminal himself, say he's going to make sure the DOJ goes after schools and organizations. He said the federal government will not have any DEI inclusion. Is dangerous. It's hella dangerous, because we already can start to see the potential fallout. In this next photo, you have three major DEI initiatives that are going crazy. Disney's chief of diversity, Warner Brothers, Netflix, and the film academies are all gone. They were cut. And they were cut due to finances, right? But they were all cut within the last week, within this passing of affirmative action, and knowing that these DEI initiatives are basically going to all fall away. These companies have already gotten rid of their DEI programs before the shit is, it hasn't even been a week yet. And you're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion being gone, right? So now people are just going to be hired. Watch the workplace numbers. Now, here's the thing. I'm not mad at a company who hires women and whatever, and they don't have a black person on staff. That's fine. You don't have to do that. You have your diversity and your inclusion. It just looks different, right? But what we're about to see is what was that show, Miss Marvel, with the Pakistani family? That's not getting renewed. That's season 1. What was the other one? Growing Pains with black folk. They gone. Would you stand up and walk out on me? Yes, they will. There's going to be this massive fallout. Like I said, you already see 3 of the biggest TV companies already start this. And this is just going to continue. Now, here's the question going forward. At what point is it merit-based only? At what point can you then look at a company and say, hey, you're only hiring white folks? Because you look at a company like Iron Mountain that only has 2% black people in leadership, and you go, well, it's Iron Mountain. It's a Fortune 500 company. There's only 2%. Let that shit drop down to 0.5. They'll be like, no, we're just hiring on merit. That's not how it works. Because you know what happens? Quick rundown. You graduate from Harvard. Guess what? You're in that Harvard fraternity. Someone from Harvard has a job for someone at Harvard who may not be a good student. That person from Harvard gets hired by the person from Harvard who gets the job. Now that person from Harvard has a kid who goes to Harvard. That kid is dumb as fuck, but that kid is now a part of Harvard. So now that job has been passed down through the Harvard legacy lineage. So now generation after generation, dumb after dumber keeps getting the Harvard job. You know what happens though? That Harvard job is white. And the next person is white. I'm sorry, let me fix that. Or Asian, because you're 30% of the Harvard population, and it continues down there. And then what happens is any initiative to diversify that organization, that corporation, that school, or anything like that gets struck down because it will be considered a racist practice. That's a mindfuck. And all of this stuff comes based off of the 14th Amendment, right? Like, that's really where this comes from. So Roe v. Wade was based off the 14th Amendment. Affirmative action was based off the 14th Amendment. And the 14th Amendment, I want to read it again because it says here, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, or deny any person within its jurisdiction equal protection of the laws. Now, that's the 14th Amendment. That should stand on its own. The reason why Roe v. Wade had to happen, the reason why affirmative action had to happen, Brown versus Board had to happen, all of these things that had to happen is because the practice of the 14th Amendment was not right. So you can't go, hey, we're just gonna go back to what it was when you were messing it up to begin with. Come fuck on. But we're sitting there with this 6-3 Supreme Court with this conservative base. Now, mind you, the saddest part of this is the Supreme Court is supposed to legitimately look at these laws, debate these laws, and go, hey, this is fair, this is not. And instead, we're going to get this clean sweep of 6-3, if anything. And the craziest part is if you do get one of those conservatives to lean towards the other side, it's still 5-4. Now, for those who are like, I can't believe the Democrats want to add more judges to the House, these are life appointments. So for the next 20 years, seamlessly, they can overturn everything, and they can literally set back the nation another 100, 200 years. And that is the problem with forcing Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett into the office like Trump did and how they did. God bless America. Anyway, any questions, comments, concerns, or anything? Because I broke it down. So yeah. I need my 100K forgiven. Ramona, you was gonna get 20. See, this is what happened. You was supposed to take your 20, sit in the corner, drop the 80, and leave it alone. Now you bringing up 100. Stop. And my 20 is back to September 1st. Write a check. We back in business. How you feel about lab-grown chicken? Sad? I mean, no. So lab-grown chicken. I think we're in America, right? So we already know. Legitimately, if you travel, some people may not have never left the country, but if you've traveled anywhere outside of the country, maybe not Mexico, because I think they get their chicken from us. But anywhere outside the country, food doesn't taste like the food we eat here. Period. McDonald's in Europe tastes amazing. I'm just gonna put it out there. It tastes amazing. It's like, what cheeseburger is this? Because that's not what we eat in the States. So the fact that we're labeling lab-grown chicken, I just think it's par for the course. I mean, we've been cloning chicken for years, which is part of the lab-grown chicken, and they voted not to have to write that on the label. So, you know, if you get like Tyson, and they like, oh, look at Tyson's farm. I ain't seen a chicken on Tyson's farm in years. So it's in the lab. I think it's sad. I think it's got to be careful. I think you have to be mindful of what you're eating. But also, let's be fair. Organic is no longer what organic used to be. All natural is not what all natural used to be. In order for something to be all natural, the field had to be flipped, treated, and then left alone for 7 years. No pesticides or anything. And then whatever grew out of that, you were able to call organic. Now it's like 3 years. But there's science behind the fact that soil needs 7 years to process whatever's in there. So lab-grown chicken, lab-grown tomatoes, lab-grown everything. If you don't pick it from the farm yourself or shoot it in the field, it's probably grown in somebody's lab. Let's see. What do you see happening in the next 10 years in regards to colleges and affirmative action? Over the next 10 years, I see a handful of colleges and universities, some of the state colleges and universities, maintaining their numbers as is. You know, that big old 5% of Negroes that they have in there, they'll keep there, right? Because they'll feel guilty if they don't have about 5% Negroes. Then you're going to get some of those other schools who are legitimately going to say with a straight face, we just haven't had applicants that meet this merit, right? And you're going to look at, maybe not your Harvard, because they got 30% Asian kids in there, but that's the people who decided to complain. See, Ramona, that was them. That was you. I want 100 gone. 100, Ramona? Just 20 was fine. You got 30% Asian American students in Harvard when you're only 7% of the population, and you got mad. Anyway, so you're going to have some schools where you see that super sharp decline, where you're going to go, they're going to have 5, and then you're going to look and it's going to be like 2% over the next 10 years. And then you're going to look at HBCUs, and you're going to see more white applicants to HBCUs because it's the school down the street from the home, and they can say, I went to Howard. So you're going to see this weird thing where it's like HBCUs, for historically black colleges, university, don't bring in students on a race-based merit, but now you're going to have white kids applying, more white kids applying, because there's always a couple of them, but you're going to have more applying because, you know, they couldn't get into Harvard and they couldn't get into Penn State University. We are. So they're going to go where they can. In some way, these government entities don't have terms like that. Yeah, that Supreme Court shit needs to change. It needs to change. Supreme Court needs to change. The Congress needs to change. But some of these government organizations used to have term limits, and then they voted them out because, again, people in power want to stay in power. Big Timmy Tom. What is that joint? Slide? Is that somebody lets me? Is that the new Twitter? Black Twitter? Yeah. So everyone's migrating to Slide. And here's the issue with all black-owned businesses. We don't want to support them the way we should. So I think Spill. Thank you. I knew it started with an S. I didn't download it yet. I'm about to join today after the show. But you get those things, and I think it would be phenomenal, honestly, if something like Spill could grow and make the money that Twitter is. Because let's be honest, Twitter is Black Twitter. You look at any entity from ESPN to Adam Schefter to they always find a way to quote or post or put something up from Black Twitter. You have Instagram accounts that have blown up, and all they do is take photos from Black Twitter and put it on their thing, and then people are like, this is so funny, oh my God. If we go out and support and sign up for Spill and support Spill, I think it's fine, but I think we can do that anywhere.